Welcome back to the New Wave Cooking Club. Chef David here in the New Wave Test Kitchen. Today we're going to do something I don't do a lot of, but we have a bunch of videos coming up for you. Baking in our New Wave oven. So millions of these around the world, and I get tons of requests for baking recipes. So we're going to do this one. This is one of my favorite breads. This is a really rich egg and butter dough. It's called brioche. Very similar to challah bread if you've had that, but this is in the French style called the brioche. And I have one in here already proofing, and I'm going to talk to you about that with the New Wave oven because you can certainly proof bread in this oven. Not a lot of people know that. This also works great as a dehydrator. I don't know if you knew that either. But anyway, we're going to make a very simple dough, and there's just a couple little tricks to remember for making my brioche dough. And I've used this recipe for many years, and it works. And you can bake this in all kinds of sizes. I bake it in loaf pans. I bake it in squares, small tins. But one of the things I get the biggest kick out of, I bake this sometimes in old coffee cans. I just give them a little kitchen spray, put them in there, let them proof and bake them. Then I have this beautiful round piece of bread. I make round French toast for my son or really cute round sandwiches for luncheons and stuff that we do. But anyway, let's get started. So a couple things. One, I've got flour, salt, instant dry yeast, sugar, water, eggs, and butter. So basically flour, yeast, water makes bread. We add the salt for flavor, but also the salt acts as a control agent to keep the yeast in line, basically. If we don't add the salt, the yeast will just go nuts. We'll have a big bubbly mess. So the measurements on this recipe are exact, and whenever you bake anything, you really have to be exact reading that recipe. You really can't take, it's not like putting salt on a steak. You really have to follow the recipe. The sugar acts as a little bit of a sweetener, but also is fuel for the yeast. Now there's some sugar in the flour, that's science, we don't want to go there, but we're going to add some sugar because the yeast will eat the sugar and create carbon dioxide and make the dough rise. Very simple. So let's start. Here's flour. Okay, goes in, easy. And then I'm going to add my yeast. And there's two different types of yeast. There's active dry and there's instant. One has to be bloomed in water, one does not. So this goes right in, okay? And then what I like to do is I like to put half the sugar in now and get this started with the water. And this kind of gives the yeast a little extra boost. Okay, getting a little bit of the sugar in there now. So as the yeast comes to life by being hydrated by the water, as the flour comes to life being hydrated by the water, we get a chemical reaction in there, and that's really what we're looking for. Now I start the mixer off on low, but in this recipe we never really go to a high speed. But this is going to mix for approximately 8 minutes, start to finish. And to do that, the reason is to develop the structure of the bread. Okay, it's not complicated. Go up a little higher. Now, if you can look inside here, you see this looks like a really dry bread dough. The water ratio to flour doesn't seem like it matches, and it doesn't. For a simple reason, the eggs contain an enormous amount of water. So really, the water in this dough, a lot of it comes from the eggs. Okay, so the dough starts coming together. In goes the rest of my sugar. Now the salt goes in because it's not going to kill the yeast, it's just going to control it. And then from here, the eggs will go in. And I like to do my eggs one at a time. And that's just a control thing. I like to see that the egg gets all the way incorporated. And just in case the eggs are extra large, I don't need all the eggs, I can control that. So I don't have to start over again. Now you'll see when you add the eggs, the dough will start getting sticky. But that's only because the flour hasn't absorbed the moisture yet, but it will. So let's go with more eggs. And you can always add a little more flour if you have to, all right? We're going to bake off some amazing rolls and breads. I love the way this smells. I love the way this actually cooks up. I make it in these little things like this so I can make beautiful sandwiches, right? You can butter these real simple, all right? You get some soft butter on here. And you got something beautiful for breakfast. This one actually, you can see has dried apples in it. My dried apple brioche we do quite often here. Let me get my little scraper, clean up the mess I always make. Okay. Okay, everybody, so the eggs are in here, and I'm about 4.5 minutes into my total mix time of 8 minutes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this start coming together, and then we're going to add our butter. Now, there's a lot of butter in this recipe, but don't be scared because the recipe works. I've been using it for years. So this is 3 sticks of butter. Just follow the recipe, and I think you're gonna have a great success with this. So what happens is after we add the butter, then we proof the dough. This is the first rising or first proofing of the dough. And what I did was I used my New Wave oven, set on 100 degrees, and I proofed it for about an hour and a half. Okay, I love the temperature control on this. It's fantastic. And look what we came out with. What we came up with was this amazing, the dough's a little sticky, but this first proof is beautiful. Now, once I start manipulating the dough, it's gonna sink because I'm gonna release some of the air. But once I mold it into my forms here to make my 2 loaves, it's gonna rise one more time, and then we're gonna bake it. It's gonna come out amazing. So let me show you. So here, real quick, let's get the butter into this one we're mixing up, so after we're all done later, we can get this done. Now make sure the butter is softened and kind of at room temperature. Otherwise, it's not going to incorporate well into the dough. Now some chefs tell you that's okay, and they're probably much better bakers than I, so if they have a recipe that does that, then that's okay. My recipe, I like to add the butter a little at a time, and I make sure it's softened at room temperature. And again, this looks like a lot of butter, but it's going to incorporate well into the dough. All right? And it takes a little time. That's why I do an 8-minute mix. So I've added the butter right around 5.5 minutes. We have a little timer over here. You can see the butter is really malleable, it's soft, and that's all we need. Don't let the butter get melted. If it's melted butter, it's not going to incorporate the same. Okay? That's important to know. So we get this in, and we'll let the mix time go. And also, as the yeast is active, eating the sugar and having a good party, it also gives off a little heat. And also the motion of the mixer generates friction, which is heat, and that's going to even soften the butter further and let it incorporate into the dough. So that being said, we'll let this guy mix a little bit, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with this. First thing I do is I sprinkle a little flour on top. You can see the flour blowing from the studio we're in, the air system here. Look, my pastry scraper, these things cost $1 at the restaurant supply store or wherever you buy your gear. You make good clean hands. Okay, now when it comes out of the proof, it's going to be a little warm. If it's a little warm, that means it's going to be a little sticky. So I use this guy right here. I'm going to knock some of the air out, and I use my pastry scraper to roll this dough around. Now this dough, now if you've made bread before at home, whole wheat bread, white bread, Italian bread, you know once you're at this stage of dough, it's pretty firm. The amount of eggs, which has fat, the amount of butter, which is fat, keeps this dough very, very soft. Now the dough should be tacky, it should not be sticky, okay? So all I want to do is knock some of the air out, and as you knock the air out, the dough will get much more firm. And then we'll be able to divide it up. And if it gets sticky, just give it a little sprinkle of flour, but not too much. But that flour will incorporate. But you can see the air bubbles in here, and that's because we're on that first proof. Okay, and just squeeze those air bubbles out. If it gets sticky, again, tack it up. A little flour. You can roll it around and clean the cutting board or your table. Okay, now this is going to go cut in half right in to our silicone mold. And I don't even have to spray it. I just have to lay this in. Long ways like this. Now, these will sit again. They'll go inside here for about an hour at 100 degrees. They're going to rise, and then I'm going to bake them. When we come back, I'm going to show you the finished beautiful dough that's going to bake in here, about 375 for about an hour. And you're going to have the most amazing brioche dough as soon as we come back. Welcome back to the New Wave Cooking Club, everyone. Chef David here in the New Wave Test Kitchen. So we mixed up some beautiful brioche dough. We were able to use the New Wave oven not only to proof it, which is to make it rise, not once, but twice, and now we just finished baking it. So take a look what we got here. And this is our silicone baking kit. And this comes out. And I used a divider so I can make 2 loaves at once, but you could even bake these freeform on our mat. It's a little warm. Whoa, it's more than a little warm. All right, that's okay. I don't mind a little heat in the kitchen. Silicone mats, nothing sticks. I love those. This is our brioche. And all I do is get a nice, it's warm, Nice slice on this. These are the freeform ones we made. That's perfect for a jelly sandwich on a Sunday morning with your loved ones. Use a serrated knife when you're cutting bread. It makes it easier. It doesn't tear the bread. Sometimes you use a straight edge knife and it will tear the bread. This one came out beautiful. This also has chunks of dried apples in here. And all I do is finish it off. I'll probably get in trouble by some people for putting this much butter on my bread, but I'm all right with that. That's it. This is our homemade brioche in our New Wave oven. Follow us on social media. Send us a picture of your bread. We'll talk soon.